Greetings to the GSU EDAC community. In this presentation, I hope to highlight important facets of educational law as it pertains to English language learners in Illinois. Let's begin by taking a look at the history of case law in our country and the implications for ELL students. Several U.S. court cases have helped to shape the law regarding the educational needs of English language learners. These cases pertain to segregation, the rights of communities to teach their native language to children, and the overall linguistic and educational needs of students whose first language is not English. As a class, we've discussed both Plessy and Brown, where first the precedence of separate but equal was established, then overturned. It's important to note that while these cases were initiated on behalf of the African American community, other minority groups suffered the consequences of the rulings and ultimately reaped the benefits as well. Additionally, various other cases set the stage for the success of Brown v. Board. In 1930 Texas, the courts decided in Independent School District versus Salvatierra, representing a group of Mexican parents, that segregation was necessary to teach children English. However, in 1931 and 1947 California, two cases, Alvarez versus Lemon Grove and Mendez v. Westminster School District, the precedent was established that segregation was not beneficial to students' English language development. In these cases, segregation was ruled against, and they may have begun to set the stage for Brown v. Board. Then there is the issue of providing instruction in a child's native tongue. In 1919 Nebraska, the Simon Act was passed, making it illegal to teach foreign language instruction to any child below the 8th grade. Challenged all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court in Mayers versus Nebraska, it was decided that while states can dictate which language to be taught during school hours, there cannot be restrictions on foreign language instruction outside of school hours. This case was crucial in that it opened the door for 14th Amendment protections for multilingual communities. Still, in the teeter-totter of our culture where rights are concerned, cases like Farrington versus Tokushige found protection in after-school language programs, but Steinbeck versus Mohawk Kekokpo used Farrington to reason children cannot be taught foreign languages in school, even when it's said to benefit the brightest students. Adding to the judicial limitation, fear that loyalty to America will be questioned, in the immediate post-World War II society, many schools dropped Japanese and German instruction altogether. Fast forward nearly 30 years and we find the most influential case for ELL students in Lau versus Nichols. The case led to the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights creating the Lau remedies applicable to all school districts. School districts must identify and evaluate ELL students, determine appropriate instructional treatments, decide when the student is ready for mainstream classes, determine the professional standards to be met by instructors, and provide English as a second language or ESL instruction, as well as academic instruction in the student's native tongue. Furthering the regulations for ELL instruction, Castañeda versus Pickard in 1981 established a three-part test. Programs for English learners must be based on sound educational theory. This is important because schools may use ability grouping, even when such a policy has a segregative effect, so long as the practice is genuinely motivated by educational concerns and is void of discriminatory motives. Number 2, programs must be reasonably implemented. We see this through the standards established in Lau. And number 3, programs must be monitored for effectiveness. This is very easy to do in today's world of testing. We can easily progress monitor our English learners in core content, but we must also monitor their English language proficiency. While the Lau remedies apply to all schools, the Castañeda tests apply only to districts receiving federal funding. As Plyler v. Doe prohibits the refusal of children of undocumented immigrants, Horn versus Flores allows states and districts to decide how they will give these children an equal educational opportunity. Lau and Castañeda work in concert with other federal requirements to dictate ELL instruction regulations in the state of Illinois. A quote from the Equal Educational Opportunity Act of 1974, quote, "No state shall deny educational opportunities to an individual on account of his or her race, color, sex, or national origin by the failure of an educational agency to take appropriate actions to overcome language barriers that impede equal participation by its students in its instructional programs." End quote. Regulations here in Illinois ensure all English learners are able to effectively participate in all programs and content areas. All of this brings us to the law here in Illinois. Students here are labeled as English learners or ELs, and their educational services are defined in Article 14C of the School Code, with the rules and implementation guidelines being detailed in Part 228 of the Administrative Code. The remainder of this presentation highlights aspects of Part 228 of the Administrative Code. Step 1 for ELL instruction compliance is to administer the Home Language Survey. Upon enrollment for K-12 students and when they actually start the program for pre-K students, school districts are to administer a survey asking at least these two questions. Is there a language other than English spoken in the home, and if so, what language? And does the child speak a language other than English? If so, what language? When possible, this survey should be given in English and in the home language. The survey must provide a space for parent signature and the date, as it will be placed in the student's temporary file and will follow the student if they transfer to another district. If a student is found to have a home language other than English, or the student speaks another language, then screening the student for English proficiency is the next step. K-12 students must be screened within 30 days of enrollment. Pre-K students must be screened within 30 days of their participation start date. There are several circumstances in which screening exemptions may apply. If a new student was screened and cleared as English proficient in his or her previous district, rescreening is unnecessary. Additionally, when students have successfully passed through an ELL program, met the state exit requirements, and are now deemed English proficient, they no longer need to be screened. I'll discuss later their need to be monitored, but rescreening is not necessary. Also, if a new student in the district was not screened or identified as ELL in their previous district, were enrolled in a general program of instruction, and they performed at or above grade level in math and reading on state assessments without ELL accommodations, they are exempt from needing a screening. This exemption only applies to students in grades 3 through 12. Remember, the point of ELL services is to remove the barrier of language so that students have an equal opportunity to be successful. So for a multilingual student, if they are performing at or above grade level with no ELL accommodations, the assumption is language is not a barrier. Two exceptions to the exceptions is that scores from the previous district cannot be older than 12 months old if they are to be used in exemption considerations. Also, kindergarten students are not eligible for screening exemptions at all. In screening for English proficiency, the state gives liberty to preschool programs to choose their screening instrument, but urges them to consider other indicators of proficiency, including evaluation of performance, samples of student work, and family input. Students in kindergarten through the first semester of first grade will use the Measure of Developing English Language, also known as the Model Test. Second semester first graders all the way through 12th grade will utilize the WIDA screener. Please note that any student with an IEP must also have those accommodations in place during the screening process. Illinois is connected to the WIDA Consortium, a member-based organization made up of U.S. states, territories, and federal agencies dedicated to the research, design, and implementation of high-quality standards-based systems for K-12 English language learners. In addition to providing the screening tests, the access for ELL's tests also comes through WIDA. Every student receiving ELL services is administered the access test annually. To test out of the ELL program, students must obtain an overall composite score of at least 4.8. The WIDA model is used as a screener for kindergarten through first grade students, but is also designed for first through 12th grade students to be used as interim assessments to inform instructional planning and other decisions related to the student's education. They can also be used to predict performance on the annual access test, much in the same way benchmark tests predict success on state assessments. Last, the model test can be used to determine tier placement on access for ELLs. WIDA's test focuses on the 4 language domains of listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and is available in both paper and online formats, although only in paper for kindergarten. The tests are designed to test the language of various content areas and not the content itself. As you can see in the last bullet point, the tests are broken into grade level clusters. This chart shows the percentages assigned to each of the tested language domains. The overall score is the most useful single score when making identification decisions because it takes into account the student's performance on all 4 domains. It is important to note that WIDA rounds down in calculations because the proficiency level reported on WIDA screeners tells you what the student can do. Rounding up would make a claim that the student can do more than he or she demonstrated on the tests. Students whose screening results are below the cut score of 4.8 for English proficiency are categorized as ELL and must enroll in either a Transitional Bilingual Education Program, TBE, or Transitional Program of Instruction, TPI. Once the student is classified as ELL, their parents must be notified in both English and in their home language. If a district has 20 or more ELL students with the same home language, the district must implement a TBE program. 19 or fewer, TPI program. TBE programs must include core subjects taught in English and the home language, ESL instruction, as well as history and culture of both the U.S. and the students' or their parents' native land. Based on individual needs assessments, students will participate either full-time or part-time. Because the total number of EL students is below 20 in a TPI program, the state allows school districts to basically personalize the treatment of each student based on their unique needs. The program must include ESL, but the rest is personalized. In order to qualify as needing only part-time TBE services, students' domain scores must fall within the scores indicated in this chart. As you review the chart, you will notice the students may not classify as English proficient. In addition to meeting the cut score for part-time placement in a TBE program, at least one of the following conditions must be met. With limited native language proficiency, proficiency tests must show that the student is not proficient in the home language, and parents must provide written statement that English is the primary language spoken in the home. Eligibility also may come in form of student grades, teacher recommendations, and state or local assessment from the previous year, all indicating the student is performing at grade level in at least one core subject that was taught exclusively in English. Students may also show a history of being at grade level in U.S. schools or via sheltered instruction in English. In a departmentalized setting, this is done with grades, recommendations, and assessments from the previous year, all indicating performance at grade level in at least 2 core subjects that were taught in U.S. schools in the student's native language or via sheltered instruction in English. If an IEP names a part-time TBE as the least restrictive environment, this accommodation must take place. And last, if the native language does not have a written component or written instructional materials are unavailable and cannot be developed, students may qualify for part-time TBE. Oral native language should also be provided as support based on the student's needs. Schools must document their efforts to obtain written instructional material and present as evidence upon request from the state. ELL students and their screening data are protected under FERPA. School districts are specifically prohibited by FERPA from releasing summary reports in response to news media requests. In this instance, FERPA requirements are not changed or modified by the Illinois Freedom of Information Act. And now on to more mandatory provisions for every ELL program. On the administrative side, TBE and TPI programs must be located in regular public school facilities and not as separate locations, unless it is completely not feasible, in which case a comparable space must be provided and the district will have to explain to the state superintendent as to why the public school building was not possible. Full course credit must be granted and counted towards promotion and graduation. The credit earned is transferable if the student needs to leave the district. ELL students must have the opportunity to fully participate in all extracurricular activities. Teaming up with a neighboring school district to provide ELL service is allowable. Preschool and summer school ELL programs are allowed but may not replace the program requirements during the school year. As for instructional specifications, the student-teacher ratio in ESL, English as a Second Language, and home language components must not exceed 90% of the average student-teacher ratio in general education at the same grade level. Even as students transfer into the school mid-year, the student-teacher ratio must meet this requirement. TBE students must be enrolled in classes with their age and grade level peers. Multi-level grouping is allowable, but must be individualized to ensure the student is receiving content at his or her grade level. If Spanish language arts is provided, the content must be aligned to the world-class instructional design and assessments, the Spanish language arts standards. Students with different home languages are allowed to be grouped together if each language can be supported by both personnel and instructional material. As the success in specials classes such as art, music, and PE are not necessarily dependent upon language, full participation in specials is expected for the ELL students with their general education peers. To promote parent and community participation, each district or cooperative shall establish a parent advisory committee consisting of parents, guardians, TBE teachers, counselors, and community leaders. The advisory is to be ran autonomously, meeting 4 times per year to participate in the planning, operations, and evaluations of the ELL programs. Meeting minutes are to be kept on file with the school district. Part of their duty is to review the district's annual program application to the state superintendent. The district must ensure the members of the committee are trained annually in languages the parents can understand. Professional development is also needed annually for anyone involved in ELL instruction, and twice yearly for the bilingual staff. Additional training is required for those who administer the screening and access assessments, as well as additional training is needed for Spanish language arts implementation. In agreement with the Equal Educational Opportunity Act, ELL students must be provided with highly qualified teachers and instructional materials. Teachers, staff, administrators must be qualified in EL or receive training. Bilingual teachers must be licensed in their content area as well as maintain their bilingual ESL endorsement. As mentioned, all entitlements afforded to students with an IEP or 504 plan must also be granted to ELL students who qualify for such services. This is known as dual services. ELL students must be evaluated in an appropriate language, and an EL specialist must participate in the IEP creation. Within the IEP, languages and modes of communication to be used must be detailed. ELL programs must be monitored to ensure progress in content areas as well as English proficiency. As mentioned, the model test may serve as interim assessments. However, students may not exit the program until they have demonstrated English proficiency. Again, the cut score on the annual access assessment is 4.8 as the overall composite score. Students who have passed through the ELL program must be monitored for 2 years after exit to ensure they have not exited prematurely and they are progressing comparably with their non-EL peers. In regards to parent communication, schools must provide translations or interpreters for LEP or Limited English Proficient parents. Qualified staff may translate, but never the child, a sibling, or untrained staff. Even if the child is English proficient, the parent may request language services. Schools must communicate in a language understood by the parent. Upon notification, parents have the right to opt out of their children receiving ELL services. Schools may not recommend they opt out, but is responsible for ensuring parents are well informed on the benefits of the ELL program. Schools may provide access to services, progress monitor, and offer ELL services in the future. In communicating progress to parents, report cards and progress notices must maintain the same timeline as general instruction notices. Report cards for ELL students must report their progress in the ELL program as well as in general instruction. Parents must be notified either through the progress report or with a separate written notice of when the student has met all requirements to transition out of ELL and into general instruction. I hope this information will be helpful to you as future administrators. Before we conclude, let's take a look at this hypothetical WIDA Access Score report to answer the following questions. Does this student qualify for ELL services? And what are some possible instructional considerations needed as this child participates in the general classroom?